post the announcement on LinkedIn this morning. It's the first time
Okay.
I've ever posted anything in my life on LinkedIn. It seems
Really?
to have worked.
Wow.
All sorts of
Congrats.
reactions from people I'd forgotten about and haven't seen in a long time.
Very good.
Yeah.
Glad you did that, Rick. Very good. I think
Uh,
I posted it on my LinkedIn as well. I don't know if it
Yeah.
popped up, but people use it.
Yeah, I'm astounded. Um, could you tell us how many people have registered? I didn't see an email with that list. What?
Yeah, they're still coming in.
Well, not the participant list. Obviously, people will be joining, but do you know, we'll have a different number of attendees and registrants. But what was the registrant list as of the last time you looked?
I checked yesterday and didn't see that, but I'm trying to check through our other email account and
Well,
hoping
we'll
we can
see soon
find it
enough.
there.
We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see soon enough. Um,
How many do you normally get for an event like this?
it's varied. For the Columbia series, we were averaging around 100, sometimes less, sometimes more. For the 3 prior series that we've done together, one per month, I think the numbers have been lower than 100, maybe what, 60, 70, Lance, on average?
Yeah, I think it's varied. It was quite high for Zarilli, not surprisingly. I think he was over 100, 120, and the others maybe 80. Varies. I think those are the ranges, 80 to 120.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm having trouble finding the accepted list, and so I'm sorry, I'm not. This is my first time helping to run this,
Yeah,
so
no,
it's
we
a little
appreciate
difficult for me. But
you're doing it.
yeah, but it looks like we've got at least about 24 accepted so far that I can see in the email inbox. So I'm sure there's more than that I'm not seeing.
What does accepted mean?
I guess those are just the ones that have accepted the invite. So I'm sure there's others that may or may not have accepted it that are probably planning on joining. Actually, no, there's quite a
Well,
few that have.
maybe 1,000 people have received the invitation,
Oh,
one way or
wow.
the other.
Yeah, and actually, a lot of these are collapsed into each other, so it's hard to say. I mean, yeah, it looks like it's in the dozens for sure.
All right. All right. Well, I've heard back from a lot of people who said they'll be joining, including some in Paris, where it's maybe a more convenient time at the end of the workday. And
Yeah, I'm seeing at least a couple dozen now.
good.
Yeah. At some point, my assumption is we get to see the list. I know there are people I've invited that I'm assuming are going to be on that list, so be nice to see.
Yeah. The reason it's good to see it in advance is when we go to the Q&A, sometimes if there's someone particularly knowledgeable or eminent, we put them kind of ahead of others in terms of the ability to ask a question, particularly if we only have time for 5 or 6 questions. And so, but Lance and I are both nimble, and we'll see who's on the call soon enough.
Okay.
As you said, just on the cheat and look at the participant list, such as it is. And we'll let people in promptly at noon and start. I have a 7-minute introduction, largely based on what you've said, Lance, at other programs. But I've changed the sequence a little bit so we don't bifurcate the information about the speaker. It's all at the end. And I go beyond the bio a little, as you did, yeah. But yeah, obviously with different information.
Looks like we've started getting some people joining already.
Okay, great. Well, this will be So right now I'm not seeing the participant list.
Is there a button at the bottom right of your screen?
Looking. Well, yeah.
If it doesn't say participants down there, I don't know if it's under.
No, it does.
Okay.
It does. But when it says that there are, up top right, it says 11 participants apart from the panelists.
Mm-hmm.
And then, view all attendees.
There,
That's
yeah,
what it
that's
was.
how you look at
There we
names.
go. Okay, excellent. Some familiar names: Jerry Maltz, Effie Ceritis. I assume until they're admitted, they can't hear the nice things we're saying about them.
I believe they can actually.
Okay. Well,
They
hello,
just can't
Jerry.
talk. They just
Hello,
can't
Effie. Hello,
respond.
everybody. Yeah, we're going to start promptly at noon, but give others a chance to sign in.
Yeah, my experience is in the minute before you get a whole load of people signing in. That's
Which is
right.
normal.
Yeah.
Marion, if you have to take a call during the program, don't hesitate. Just turn your camera off, and we'll somehow wing it. I invited a few people in Paris, not Jean-Louis. I thought that would be too embarrassing, but I did invite people who said, "Oh, we know Marianne. We've worked together." Vincent Levin, in particular, said to send you his regards, and Pascal Lalique said she would try to sign in if she could. But there are others who you know and some you don't. So I brought out my Sciences Po mug for the occasion. I gave a talk thanks to Kathleen Babet there year and a half ago now, before the
Okay.
pandemic, maybe 2 years ago, and all I got for the effort, since I couldn't take any money, was the mug.
Nice. It's useful.
But I've been reading about the controversies there. I know you teach a course that talks about controversies, but the
Yes.
leadership debacle this year has been astounding.
Yes. It's crazy there. But now there is a new president. So there is like a president and a director. And so the president has just been changed, and now they have to choose a director. But yeah, very complicated.
How did you find time to do both degrees concurrently? I find that amazing.
I took like 3 years, and the 2 degrees were in 2 years, and so I mixed. I managed it. But my philosophy degree was quite like open. I could choose the courses I wanted.
Yeah, so there was
it was nice. Like I also chose in function of my agenda, and yeah, it's manageable. And it's also the fact that the schools are very close, in the center of Paris. So I could go from one to another in like 15 minutes. And yeah, that's nice. And do you still teach now at Columbia?
Yeah, at Columbia.
Right?
We've stopped for the summer. Last summer we continued through because the economy was so strange that students who were remaining in New York, many could not find jobs. We did a research project for all those who wanted, from the students from the spring semester continuing into the fall, on the impact of the pandemic on architecture, engineering, and construction, looking at response and recovery and preparedness issues, and kept the Columbia Lecture Series going through the summer. So we're saying we did 19 lectures relating to the impact of the pandemic in different cities around the world. From Paris, it was Kathleen Babet who spoke, more about transportation issues, obviously, for the Société de Compagnie. but we had people from Wuhan and from Seoul, not just from the US and Europe. And we segued into 9 programs on issues of social justice and social equity as it related to design and construction. So I missed that lecture series. It was very fast paced. We did 1 speaker per week for 28 successive weeks.
Oh.
This once a month is almost too easy.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I've been doing a panel format, which just concluded on monuments and anti-monuments, coming out of the work of a Polish-American sculptor who's doing a anti-monument in Poland at Oransko, the sculpture park outside of Warsaw, to commemorate the murder of Jyoti Singh in New Delhi in 2012. Which drew lots of attention to everyday violence, particularly against women. So that was interesting because in more of a European mode, we had as many as 6 or 7 speakers in each panel. And the logistics and coordination of that was much more complicated. But that was every other week, for 6 sessions. I read somewhere recently on a blog that another Statue of Liberty is going to be sent to New York from Paris.
Yes,
Is
I
that
read
the
that
little
also.
one near the river? Is
But
that one?
I didn't know. I didn't know. I read that in the newspapers.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
nice gesture of it. I don't think anyone was waiting for it. Probably very timely. Would have been better during the prior administration, which we don't mention the name of. We're 1 minute away. So people also joined during the program, which is not surprising, but I think we will get started promptly. I have an introduction that goes a little bit beyond the 100-word bio. I thought it was just a little too short. So I've included a couple of other things. I hope they're not too embarrassing.
Okay.
And at noon, if we could let everybody in, we'll start on time and end late or end more or less on time. Let's see, participants. Has everyone been admitted? Who's in the waiting room?
Yes, I believe so.
Great. Excellent. Well, I'll say hello, good afternoon to everyone in this time zone, and good evening to those who are later. Good morning to those in the Pacific time zone. Welcome to the Green Cities 2021 talk by Marion Waller today. My name is Rick Bell. I'm proud to be a member of the board of the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this event, which is the 4th in a series of monthly programs focusing on sustainable urbanization attributes of different leading cities around the world. And how we're making progress toward greener cities. I'm going to start with a few logistical points as people join the room. For those of you who have requested AI continuing education credits, thanks to the efforts of Perkins Eastman, as sponsor, we will be receiving 1 learning unit if you attend for most of the program. You can't just sign in and leave. I think AI requires 3/4 of the duration. Information on how to self-report for AIA credits will be indicated in the chat room. I hope somebody else does that. I'm not sure I have that information on hand. The organizer of the overall series, thank you, Lance, if you could do that. The organizer of the series is the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, led by Lance J. Brown, president, pictured. The CSU is a not-for-profit organization based in New York that builds connections between the UN, the design professions, academia, and allied associations. The stated purpose of the CSU is to advocate for responsible design and planning, increasing awareness about emerging issues, and facilitating knowledge transfer between policymakers, urbanists, activists, architects, and others. We do so by catalyzing cooperation and collaboration. At the same time, we vigorously promote the UN Sustainable Development Goals and place particular emphasis on SDG 11, which of course says to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And we advocate for the new urban agenda adopted in October of 2016 at Quito, at the UN Habitat 3 meeting there. And among its commitments, of course, are improving connectivity and supporting innovative and green initiatives, along with promoting safe, accessible, and green public spaces. I'd like to thank the partner organizations who've contributed to both thinking through the program and proselytizing it, making information about it available, starting with, of course, our key partner, the UN Habitat Office in New York, also the AIA New York chapter and its Committee on Planning and Urban Design, which is doing a very interesting program coming up on June 10th, the UN Habitat Professional Forum, the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development New York, Columbia University's Center for Buildings, Infrastructure, and Public Space, that's my day job, and the Creative Exchange Lab Center for Architecture and Design, and most importantly, Perkins Eastman for providing the platform for the series. Thank you all. I want to give special thanks to Lance Brown, President of the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, for his leadership and for moderating the first 3 Green Cities programs. Videos of the prior speakers, Dan Zarilli from New York, Washington Fajardo from Rio de Janeiro, and Josep Bohigas from Barcelona, are available on the CSU website, which you can Google, but I'll say is Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, all spelled out, .org. Please visit that site to see our other resources, our recent and older publications, and upcoming events, including the next Green Cities Talk, first Thursdays. That would be Thursday, July 1st at noon Eastern Time. For today's program, if you have questions for the speaker, or even questions in the form of a statement, please use the Q&A function to send them to Lance and to me. We'll be monitoring them and we'll share them with Marion, and we'll get to as many as possible. Our guest today, Marion Waller, is advisor to the Mayor of Paris, and I'd say the go-to person on all matters pertaining to architecture and urbanism at l'Hôtel de Ville. It's my honor to introduce her today and to moderate this program. I count Marianne as a good friend, as well as the most articulate. I crossed out smartest, but I probably should add that back in. The smartest and most committed person I've met in municipal government, and I've worked in municipal government since John Lindsay was mayor, for 8 mayors in New York. Marion Waller is advisor Dan Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris. She's in charge of architecture, urban landscape, green spaces, and funerary monuments. Marion has previously worked for the deputy mayor in charge of urban planning, Jean-Louis Misica, and has helped deploy Reinventing Paris, Reinventing Paris, the international call for innovative urban projects that was then exported to other cities around the world, including a few in the US, although not New York, unfortunately. She is an urbanist and a philosopher specialized in environmental studies, and in 2016, published her first book, Artefact Naturel, Natural Artifacts, which has the subtitle Nature, Réparation, and Responsabilité, more or less the same words in English, probably deliberately, about ecological restoration and ways of re-inhabiting nature, available from Édition de l'Éclat, and also the PDF is available for free online, I just found out, which, and it's a very good read, only 114 pages and impactful. Speaking more personally, I would add that Marion and I first met, and I'm still deeply appreciative, at Les Grands Voisins, which is a former hospital complex in Paris at Donfort-Rochereau, near the center of the city, that the city of Paris helped transform into incredible mixed-use incubator space, homeless shelter, refugee center, place for urban camping, affordable housing. a real model of how to not ghettoize refugees or the homeless. I'd been then working at the New York City Department of Design and Construction, and I'd say because of Marion's efforts and those of her colleagues and her explanations, Les Grands Voisins became the model for what DDC, along with the New York City Department of Homeless Services, is attempting still to achieve at the Bellevue shelter. And some of you in the audience may be much more familiar with the current disposition of that project, but a lot of it had to do with changing perceptions. Marion was, I'll say, promoted in July of 2020 to her current post of mayoral councilor, where she also has the responsibility for overseeing energy retrofits of buildings. In addition to her city job, she's taught at Sciences Po. Thank you, Sciences Po, for seeing the light. She's also an alum. Since September of 2018, and on their site, it says that her current course is called Introduction to Urban Controversies, and I hope we get into some of those during the discussions today. She holds concurrent degrees from Sciences Po in Paris and from the Université Paris-Sorbonne, Paris 4, down the street. I read somewhere that you speak, Marianne, you speak 6 languages, including, I won't go there. That doesn't include the special, how do we call it, street savvy vocabulary needed to transform the world's most wonderfully complicated city. Dominique Alba once told me that when I said, isn't there anything simple in Paris, she said, even the simple things are complicated. But I'd rather like to quote Josephine Baker as an invocation to the talk. Born in St. Louis, but her hometown was Paris. Maybe that was Gertrude Stein, but Josephine Baker's birthday was today. She was born on this day in 1906 in St. Louis. And she said that in a song, of course, that Paris is un coin de paradis, a little corner of paradise. Last aside, and I'm not sure where I read this, I don't think I heard it verbally, but former Deputy Mayor Jean-Louis Musica has called Marianne the mayor of the future. And I think there are 2 senses of that. Marion, I have to say, I'm really, really glad that you're here with us today, and the screen is yours, and I'll hide in the background. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick, for the introduction. So, yes, just 1 second. Okay. Is it working?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you for the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization for this invitation. So I will be talking about several projects of architecture and urban space in urban planning, sorry, in Paris. So just a picture to begin, because Rick, you were talking about paradise, and I like this picture because it reminds us that when we think about a city, it's like thinking about the buildings, but also all the natural assets. And I think we forget too often that what makes a city spectacular, like Paris, is not only the buildings, but it's really this very special harmony between the river, between the green spaces and the buildings. And I wanted to begin by that because I think we really have to move from a dichotomy that is too often used in urban planning and in general, that is the dichotomy between what we call city and what we call nature. And that's why I'm very attached to the idea of ecological restoration, not only in natural areas, but also in cities. And I think it's very important to see cities as spaces where there can be an ecological restoration, where we can relearn to interact with our environment. And I think that we have there has been too much this opposition between, on the one side, like natural parks, especially in the US, and on the other side, big cities, as if big cities were like only dedicated to human beings, and as if like natural parks were spaces like white spaces, etc. And that's very important now for Paris, because you were talking about controversies, and I think it's really the big controversy now in Paris. It's the fact that we are trying to transform the landscape of the city, with two main priorities being the fact that we want a greener city, and we think that it's compatible with our patrimony, and we want a city dedicated to people and not to cars. And that means actually quite important changes in our landscape. And there is a controversy, because some people say that it goes against the DNA of Paris. And some people say the DNA of Paris is like a mineral city. And I think it's always important to remind that the city of Paris is this combination of vegetal elements and built elements. So that's a map of Paris that you may know. It's the map of density in Paris. And as you can see, like other cities in the world, we are a very dense city, one of the densest cities in the world. And I'm showing this map because it shows how much it's complicated to transform the city, because we don't have so many spaces left inside the city, and the city is quite small. You see the limits with the white line, which is the ring road. And we are a very small city when compared to London, Berlin, or New York. And so transforming this small city is complicated, because it's already built, and because it's very dense, and because of course we have a lot of patrimonial assets, which is a chance, but it also makes things a bit complicated when we want to change the landscape. So that's yeah, the beginning of our work, this map and the existing situation, and we try to change things from this starting point. So I wanted to also to start by I think one of the most emblematic projects that that shows the political vision and ambition of the mayor Anne Hidalgo, which is this previous highway that you may know. So this highway was along the Seine River for many years. And so it was, of course, dedicated to cars, as you can see. And so the mayor decided to transform this highway into a space dedicated to pedestrians, to bikes. And this was really the starting point of a major change in the city, saying that now in Paris, the cars won't be the center anymore, the central point of planning, but that people and bikes and everything will be the center. And so this was a very important moment for the city. It was a huge controversy, because people said that it would not be possible anymore to access to Paris, that it was crazy. And what is interesting in urban planning is that once you implement the project and once people actually appropriate the space, then controversy stops immediately. And actually now nobody would go against this project since it has been realized. So from a highway, it has become a space with many uses, playgrounds, sports, people just like walking, skating, and summer is now starting. I have been there 2 days ago, and it's really crazy how people enjoy the space. A lot of children, restaurants, dancing. So yeah, that's, you know, the good thing with urban planning is that once you liberate the space, people usually go there very fast. And so this was really the starting point for urban planning for Mayor Hidalgo's vision, and we tried to apply this vision to a lot of different projects. and public space is as important as construction. And so, as Rick said, I worked a lot on a project that tried to change the way we build actually in Paris. And so this project was called Reinventing Paris. And the starting point was the fact that the construction sector actually takes 50% of natural resources and produces 25% of carbon emissions, which is actually huge. People don't always know those figures, but I think it's important to remind that the building industry is one of the less innovative and productive industries in the previous years. Like, it has not really changed radically its ways of doing. And so what we wanted to do in Paris is really say, okay, now with the power of Paris, we want all the sectors, so the developers, the architects, the constructors, to change their ways of doing. And we want to change paradigm. So in order to achieve that objective, we launched this competition, and the idea was actually to choose some sites in Paris that were owned by the city and that we could sell or lend to the private sector. And before, what we used to do, and what most cities do in the world, is that we used to sell those land to the highest bidder. And this time, with this call for projects, we said this time sites will be sold to the best project and not to the highest bidder. And this technical change was actually a revolution for urban planning, because it really pushed developers and architects to do their projects completely differently, because we said, okay, we want the projects to be innovative in an environmental and social way, and we want every project to be really adapted to the area. We want the materials to be good, and the best project will win. And we accepted also to lower the value of our land sometimes if the project was very social, for example. So that was also a big move by the city. And that's how we began to interact differently with the private sector in Paris. So we chose 23 sites, very different in the city. Some of the sites were like old buildings in the center of Paris, some were waste land along the ring road. And we wanted to show that innovation was possible in all those different situations. That it was not only on the like empty space, that it could be in very different situations in Paris, because people had sometimes this image of Paris that it's a city like a museum city where you can't innovate. So we wanted to show the contrary, and we actually had a lot of success, and we received 372 projects on all the sites, like real projects with big teams that were very motivated. And so we were able to see all the possibilities of doing differently in Paris. And of course, also a lot of different nationalities and professions mobilized. So I will show some of the projects. And just a word on that. So as I said, the idea was to show how we can foster innovation in a city which is mostly built. And also how to extend the scope of urban commons. And this word urban commons is very important, because it's the idea that every building that is added in the city, every square meter has to be useful. Like there are no free square meters in Paris, or I guess also in New York, because space is so rare that every square meter has to really bring something to the neighborhood, has to have a social value. And we wanted to show that also. So a first project that is interesting is this project called, it's about food, and it was an abandoned railway station that was not renovated. And so we proposed to the candidates to renovate the railway station and to build a tower just beside, a small tower. And this project is entirely about food production and consumption. And what was interesting in this call for project is that we had teams that were very coherent. For example, in this team, there were like chefs, there was a food university, and they really saw the project together. So that design comes at the end of this common reflection with the final user. And so with a lot of urban agriculture on the roofs, on the terraces. This is another image of the project. And so we are really excited about this project because it will show how we can combine in Paris patrimony and new building. The use of wood was quite new for Paris. I mean, it was, of course, existing in the past, but it was quite new for this time. And we wanted to show also that those natural materials have their place in the city. And now the building permit of this project has been obtained. So we are looking forward to the construction works. Another project which was quite emblematic was the one called 1,000 Trees, which is on top of the ring road. So it's emblematic because the site we proposed was a space above the ring road where we thought that it could be interesting to create a building that would also be a bridge between Paris and the city on the other side. And so this project proposed to create 2 forests where people could cross from one city to another. And so it was interesting for a change of image in this infrastructure, the ring road that we only see as a constraint, and that could actually also bring a great project. So that's the interior of the building. So it was very inspiring for other projects in Paris. A third one is this project where it was an existing building in the center of Paris. So this big building in the center, which used to be like an administrative building. And actually it was a public building, but it was not open to the public because it was only for people working there. And so what is interesting there is that the winning project proposed to open the site. And so now the construction works will be finished in less than a year, I think, and people will be able to discover the building, the courtyard, to cross from the Seine River to the boulevard. And in this building that was only offices, there will be like 12 different uses, from a hostel to social housing to urban agriculture, art spaces, and we actually chose a project that was very respectful of the existing building. And for us, it was important to show that innovation is not only about doing like design, impressive design, is also respecting the existing buildings. And so we are really excited for this project to be soon finished, and there will be a market inside. And we are also in Paris, we are very attached to creating social housing everywhere we can. So in this project, it's in the center. In the same building, we will have social housing and like private housing and a hostel and a luxury hotel. And we want all those uses to be really mixed, not only at the level of the neighborhood, but also at the level of the building. So I wanted to show 2 projects that are already finished. This one is really an incredible project, and if you come to Paris, you should really visit it. It's called La Ferme du Rail, so the railway farm. And it's a project that combines housing for like for people working there, and a farm, and the building is entirely made of like local materials, so like wood and straw that have been found in the Paris region. And for us, it was very important to show that we can come back to those materials and not only building concrete in Paris. And it's along a previous railway line, which is closed. And there is a restaurant. And this project, there was no developer, but they managed to do the project quite quickly. And we were very attached also to sell or lend our lands to teams that were like NGOs, where there were no developers, because we saw that the real estate sector and urban planning is not only reserved to developers, and if there are some very motivated NGOs or citizens, we have to accompany them so that they can do a project. And we were happy to see that this project without developer was one of the first to actually be implemented. So it shows that it's possible to have an economic model and to have such projects. Another one, it's called Edison Light. It's also finished, and it's participatory housing with a lot of green spaces. And here they don't pay charges because the owners of the apartments also own the shop, and so the shop pays for the charges of the apartments. And they were able to co-design their apartments. And what is interesting is that all the projects that have been implemented yet really look like the images, the competition images. So it was not a competition for ideas. It was really a competition for projects that had to be feasible. So yeah, so this competition really changed our ways of doing in Paris, and we tried to apply those principles to other sites in Paris. For example, the Tour Montparnasse, one of the towers we have in the center of Paris, and this tower usually is not so much appreciated by the Parisian people because they say it's too dark and it's not a nice place to go. And so we wanted to change the image, and we organized the competition with the owners. And some architects proposed to change completely the tower, like change the shape and everything. And finally, we chose a project that is quite respectful of the current shape of the tower. And they said that we should keep what we can keep and only change what is necessary. And so they added balconies at the low level of the tower that would be the same level than like Haussmannian buildings. And they also added several uses like a hotel, like cultural spaces, so that it is not only an office tower. And so I think they really respected the history of the building while, yes, adding and changing the color, of course, and adding what was necessary. And so the building permit has been obtained also. So we are excited about the construction works beginning. So this will be one of the terraces of the tower. And more generally, we really try to develop urban agriculture in Paris because we think that it's not only for fun, like it's very important for like education, having a lot of agricultural spaces on the roofs of schools or houses so that children can see how like plants grow, but it's also important for to refreshen the city. And so we try to do it everywhere we can on private or public buildings. Those are some examples. This is just in front of La Bastille. It's on the roof of the Opéra Bastille. So it really shows that on many different buildings we can do urban agriculture. And so we push for that. So what we learned from this competition was those new rules for architecture that we implemented since in Paris. So first rule is changing the recipe, meaning that before developers used to explain to us that it was only possible to build in concrete. And so we said now every time we are controlling like a competition, we say we want biosource materials. So we replaced concrete with like wood, or straw, or terracotta, or stones, and we are really pushing for that, and like also helping all the economic actors of those businesses, because we want to go out of concrete. Then buildings should create ecosystems, meaning that every new building has to bring some green spaces to the area. So of course on roofs, terraces, but also on the ground. So we try to, every time there is a new building, to ask the developer to plant trees. And in our new planning rules, we will really put that in the rules so that every building, every square meter has to be compensated with also green spaces. And of course, maybe the most important rule is to use what's already there, because too often buildings are being demolished while they could be maintained. So now we are really, every time a developer comes to us saying that they want to demolish the building, we really say, okay, is there any option that allows keeping? And we really fight for it every day, because it's not easy, but we try to change those habits. And that's an image of a pavilion that was made during COP21, only with reused materials, so doors. All those materials were taken from buildings that were being transformed, and it showed that we can build with reused materials, and that it can be nice. It's just in front of the city hall. Then, of course, during the pandemics, it had an impact on our urban planning, especially on the public space, and it was quite. It helped us also sharing our vision for Paris, because we had to adapt quite quickly, and the Parisian people were quite open-minded for changes in public space. So we used a lot what we call, what everybody calls tactical urbanism, meaning doing faster and lighter also in public space. And that was a very important moment for Paris, showing that we can do differently. And of course, one of the most emblematic things was creating bike lanes on all the boulevards, and we did it in a very few months, and it was interesting to see that, of course, Parisian people adopted the bike lanes very fast, and notably on the Rue de Rivoli, which became a symbol, because it became dedicated to bikes and taxis and buses, no more private cars. And that was very emblematic for Paris, because it's in the center, obviously, and it also showed the vision of the mayor. And now the street has been really transformed, and there is less noise, less pollution, and it's crazy how bikes went there very, very fast. During the pandemics, of course, we also had to find new spaces for people queuing, for example. So we reclaimed a lot of parking spaces, and we wanted to do that. I mean, it wasn't the election program, but we did it faster, and we had to do it, yeah, very fast at the beginning for queues like here. But it helped us accelerating our program of transforming parking spaces, because the mayor announced that she wanted to transform half of parking spaces in Paris, which is huge. And so the idea is to dedicate all those spaces for pedestrians, for green spaces, for many uses, and for parklets also, that you know well in the US. And so she took one decision that was very important, that after the first lockdown, the mayor said that all cafes and restaurants could occupy parking spaces that were just in front, to put terraces, and that was very emblematic, because with this simple administrative change, a lot of parking spaces were used by the restaurants and cafes, and it was really beautiful to see how those spaces could evolve quite quickly. And of course, once you do that, you don't go back, and now it's really like accepted by everyone, and it went quite fast. We also tried a new urban design for sanitary issues when it was very important to have sanitary distanciation. And so, for example, we tested this design along schools, and the idea was to test a design that would not be only about safety and sanitary alerts, but that could also be nice. So we tried this design with like waves, so that children could play around, and it was important for us to have, yes, a design not only about fear. So of course, this requires a new urban narrative. I mean, it's also talking about streets differently, really finding a new design so that people understand that in every street, people are prioritary and not cars. So we have launched a consultation called "What would you do with 10 square meters in front of your house?" And the idea was showing the potential of parking spaces and showing how many activities could be done there. So, for example, that's in a small street, how we can transform a bit of space into green spaces. So we are just at the beginning of this movement, but I really think that for the Parisian street, it can be a change in the landscape, in the usual image we have, and it can respect our patrimony and adding all those uses. And finally, and maybe one of the most important things I think now for urban planning is really planning the city for children. And the mayor has one program that is called making schools the capital of each neighborhood. So meaning that every school has to be the basis of many activities. And so now we open all the courtyards of the schools during weekends, which was a small revolution for the city of Paris. And what we are doing is transforming all streets in front of schools so that those streets, we call it streets for children or streets for schools. And in those streets, we want children to feel really safe and to be able to play, to bike. And so we are now beginning construction works in all those streets, greening those streets, creating playgrounds, so that they understand that it's completely a different space in the city. And on the right, it's an example of a city that has been closed like every Friday for several years. It's called Rigolote, so like the funny street, and it's a local organization that has bought several games, and they install it in the street. And I have seen that that street, it's completely crazy how much the children really go there and enjoy the space. And I think it's very inspirational to show how just by like letting a street without cars for a period of time can completely change how we use public space. And that's for us really our starting point for urban planning, because if we manage planning a street for children, then we think that it can be welcoming for anybody. So we think it's a good referential starting at the kids level. So thank you, and I will be happy to answer questions, of course. Thank you so much for the invitation again.
Superb presentation, Marion. Thank you. Thank you so much. There are several questions from audience members, but as moderator, I'm going to be selfish and take the privilege of asking the first one or two before going to those from the audience. Cities learn from each other. It's clear how much New York has learned from Paris over the years. Vélib was 8 years ahead of City Bike, for example. The High Line wouldn't have existed, but for the Cré Vert. You showed as an example of one of the completed projects that of Clara Simet, La Ferme du Rail. I was privileged to be able to look at that project just before, the week before the lockdown, 15 months ago, with Clara and Michel Zawi. And I was blown away by not only the inclusion of urban agriculture within the project, but its disposition in relation to the rail, as you said, Petit said too. If you look at the High Line and the market rate or luxury housing adjacent to it, very different lesson that gets to all sorts of political and social values that we may not have time to analyze completely. But in Artefact Naturel, in natural artifacts, you talked about the importance of a reinsertion of nature, a reinvention of nature, not virgin forest, but something that is created by human beings in an image that is incorporating their vision of how to combine things. That project and the others that you've shown do that. how does that incentivized? How do you make that happen? Particularly when it also includes, as I saw it at Cloudless Project, social housing, student housing, not just housing for the wealthy.
Yeah, I think it's really important to develop hybrid spaces and to show that then we can create ecosystems where we have a positive interaction with the environment. And as we said, it's important to show that it's possible not only in like wide spaces, natural parks, but that it's possible at the heart of the city. And I think I really believe that it's everything about how you ask the command when you organize a public competition. I mean, it's so much important when you write the rules of a competition, and cities, all cities organize competitions at one point. And actually, I think that we are, as cities, we are more powerful than what we think, because in a city like Paris or New York, the reality is that space is so precious that you can ask a lot and a lot more to developers, because developers are ready to do so much to be able to build in the city, that if you ask for like 50% of social housing, you will always find somebody who is able to build with 50% of social housing. Yeah. And if you ask for like shelters, if you ask for parks, you will always find somebody who wants to build in Paris or in New York. So I really believe that it's about how we ask things when we organize competitions, and we should always be more demanding. And it's not being like against the private sector. It's really finding the good collaboration with them, because they find their interest in that, and because we have so many candidates, so we know that they find an interest, but we have to ask more. And that's really what I learned from this competition. And I think that many cities could ask more from developers.
One of the questions from those in the audience, Priscilla Irana, forgive me if I mispronounced the name. There are actually two excellent questions from her, relate to diversity. One, probably talking about Reinventing Paris, I remember the criteria for selection was not just the return to the city. It wasn't a request for expressions of interest or a request for proposals that were about money. It was about what the programming brought to the diversity of a neighborhood, to the social value, combined with other economic and functional needs. Priscilla's question, I'll read verbatim because it's excellent. If known, could some info be provided on how diversity and inclusion was ensured in these different projects? Diversity of people, economic status, disabilities, etc. Maybe beyond Reinventing Paris, but starting there.
Yes, it was one of the criteria. So we really, when we wrote down the rules of the competition, like social inclusion and social innovation was really one of the main criteria, and we asked the candidates to show how their building would be able to like mix people, bring different people together, and having social programs that allow that. So I mean, it's about who are the partners in the team. So that's why we asked also the developers to team up with like a local organization, with NGOs, and also, yes, what will be the final program in the building? Like, I mean, it's not only communication. It's really like what types of housing units you have at the end, and what ratios, and also who will be like the shopkeepers, and all of that was taken into account in the competition, and it allowed us to have an image of what it would be in the future, the building, and what people it would bring together.
Yeah. She had a follow-up question that I'll preface by saying, in one of your other talks, or maybe it was in the book, you talk about the biodiversity that can be created by human beings, by people. You compared, I think, in an aviary, an urban aviary, a created home for bees, and you also talked about the difference in similarity of a dam created by a beaver and the weavings that people do. Her question is similar to that in terms of talking about biodiversity. I won't extend it to biophilia, but why not? Specifically, she asks, also curious to know how maintenance of the green spaces is being monitored in regard to the use of agrochemicals, potentially pesticides, species diversity, wildlife presence, etc. You've talked a little bit about that today and elsewhere. It's not just the plants.
So we have quite strong rules in Paris because we have removed like pesticides and any chemical products in our like parks services. So we have signed a lot of documents about that, and on the private green spaces, because with this competition we helped develop a lot of private green spaces. We really asked also the teams to show how they would actually maintain those spaces, and that's why a lot of urban agriculture firms or NGOs were part of the teams, and we wanted them to commit for the future, like that they would actually take care of the green spaces created. And so we have a contract. What is interesting is that in the selling contract between the city and the winners, there are actually commitments about what the building will be in 5, 10, 15 years. And if they said that there would be a roof with, I don't know, vegetables, their commitment is not only at the selling moment, but also after. And so we have the right to check every year that they are respecting what they announced. And that's why they have to have in their teams people who know how to maintain those spaces.
Yeah, good answer. I'm going to combine two questions from similar questions from members of the audience. One from David Michael, who compliments the designs and compliments your presentation before asking, can this be applied to unplanned towns and settlements? An example will be Kibera in Nairobi and many others in Africa. And just after that, a question from Yasmin Hebert, who runs the Creative Exchange Lab in Architecture and Design Center in St. Louis, one of our sponsors and collaborating organizations. She asks, how can the Paris example be applied in other cities, including places that have lost population and resources, deindustrialized cities like St. Louis. So I won't compare St. Louis to Nairobi, although it would be intriguing to do so. Applicability, is Paris special?
Yes, I mean, of course, there is never a design that you can apply to any city, but the recent years, I think we've seen in the world how there are like similar challenges in big cities, and that we can sometimes apply the similar recipes, such as temporary bike lanes or also temporary occupation. You talked about that, Rick, between Paris and New York. And so definitely we can learn one from each other. But when talking about design, I think, of course, there is no design that can be applied to any city. And I also think that northern cities have a lot to learn from southern cities in terms of doing architecture and urban planning that is less costly and maybe less spectacular sometimes. But in terms of public space, like I lived in Manila for a year in the Philippines, and for me it's a very important experience, because with less financial means, I think in terms of public space there are sometimes some very interesting things that have been done there, and also in terms of neighborhood. Yeah, very often in like northern cities we talk about yes, we should have a more lively neighborhood, and we try to reinvent, you know, traditional things of neighborhoods that you can find in many cities, more in the south or that were existing in the past, and so sometimes we are also, I think, too complicated in urban planning. in our cities, and targeting simple recipes. So that's one thing, and then I think I really think it's about having also mayors and political leaders who have an urban vision, and that's not always the case. And having a clear urban vision for a city, I really saw how it can drive the private sector. Because if you don't have a clear vision for your city, then the private sector, they don't know what to do. They won't do great things. But if you know what you want, and if you are able to explain it to the private sector, then I really think you can get great planning. And it's quite easy to see it from one city to another. Sometimes you go to a middle-sized city, but you see how public space is really coherent, and how buildings have been really controlled and with a high quality, because there was a mayor that was attentive to that. So yeah, I really believe in politics for that.
Yeah, having worked for several mayors, it does make an incredible difference. And Hidalgo, of course, after Michael Bloomberg, was chair of C40 and achieved an awful lot. Took Reinventing Paris concurrently to the world, and even in Paris was looking underground. And, the idea, the inventiveness of what came out of your administration, with Jean-Louis and others. One of the questions from, I'm going to combine two of them, both provocative. Lance J. Brown, who's president of the Consortium for Sustainable Urbanization, says, how do you cut through the red tape? There's an entrenched, I've been in City Hall in Paris. It's an incredible building. I rather prefer the pavilion that you showed. I saw it then. But the architecture which you toured me through speaks to a potential for a bureaucratic mindset. Not all that different from what we have in the municipal building in New York, which I keep as a reminder for 1 million square feet of bureaucrats, some of whom are on the call. Hello. And then Yanis Zelgakis, I'll combine his question. Yanis is one of the more provocative questioners. I'll get to the economic one that really gets to is anything ever really devoid of benefits for those who own property? And we saw this in the High Line big time. We've seen it around the similar urban pathway in Atlanta, where real estate values go up when improvements that are made for the benefit of existing neighborhood residents take place. In New York, Mitch Silver, the Parks Commissioner, who's a planner, has talked a lot about why it's necessary to improve parks in poor neighborhoods for the benefit of the people who are living there. It doesn't serve the gentrifiers. It doesn't serve to drive displacement. Paris, from the viewpoint of many who visit from time to time, is a city of rich people, but it really isn't. Not just around the Périphérique, but throughout the city, there's an incredible diversity ethnically and economically. How do you assure that the things that you cut through the red tape, sometimes with the assistance of the private sector pushing, don't end up only benefiting the people who are cutting through the red tape?
I think it's a hard question for all municipalities, because we know that when we improve public space, then we cannot control all the private land around. So of course there are mechanisms of we want to improve a street or a park, and then we don't get the value of that. It's the owners who get the value of that. So we know that. So one thing we do is doing a lot of social housing, and when we invest a lot of public money, like creating an entire new neighborhood or creating a huge park, it's in general always because we create also a lot of social housing around. So we are really trying to make our public investment prioritary in areas where there is a lot of social housing. That's the first thing. And we also try to to have a public ownership of some shops. We have a public society dedicated, public firm dedicated to that, owning like shops in areas where we are transforming a lot of, where we are transforming spaces, so that we control also the lower level of buildings, and that's very important also to ensure diversity. And we are also working on like mixed models, but in France we don't always have the good tools to do that. I think maybe in the US you have better tools, but for example we are working on the Champs-Élysées and we want to transform the avenue, but there is so much money in the buildings around that we want also the private owners to be part of the project also financially. And we are actually working on what could be the good tools to do that, because it's not so easy. And I think all cities have the same issues about that.
I think we have time for 2 more questions, and although I have many of my own, I'm going to defer to the excellent questions coming from audience members. Emily Van Vleck asks, quote, I am curious about whether there was any opposition, political or otherwise, to creating these green open spaces, particularly in the context of streets and parking spaces. If so, how was it overcome? We've certainly seen that in New York, both for congestion pricing, loss of parking in Long Island City and elsewhere. Similar in Paris?
Yeah, sure. There are always opponents to that because we are removing space for cars, because I mean, space is so rare in Paris that if you give space to some people, is that you remove it from other uses at some point. So it's true that we are removing some spaces for cars, and so of course we have opponents against that. But it's getting lower and lower, because now even the right wing are like not completely against those policies. So and then some people more like in some patrimonial associations who say that it goes against the landscape of the city, which I find personally crazy, because how can you say that a city is without nature? But anyway.
Yeah. And the last question, I think it's the best. I thank you. It's from a colleague at CSU, Ludivine Corny, who coincidentally lives in Paris. So ask the continuity question, which we continually ask in New York when there's as we are looking at imminently with the mayoral election upon us in New York. How did the things, I work for de Blasio on things that we would like to think will continue, but there's no assurance that they will. So Ludovine's question is, quote, how is the role of the city of Paris within the development of the Grand Paris to how do you ensure this vision of ecosystem and nature is preserved in the future projects selected? And I'll extend that to say, and in future administrations. And when you're not there to assure that it happens.
That's hard. Like you can't control the future. You can, I mean, the thing is that it's quite slow if you want to change urban rules in France and in many countries. So, I mean, if there were like opponents coming and controlling the city, it would take some time for them to change the rules. So I guess if we manage to write the good rules, it would take some time to change it. So that's a good side of urban planning being slow. And yes, it's also a city that is so much controlled by both the city, the state, and many associations that like you can't do like you can do really very bad things. Like I think too many people are looking at it, so sometimes it's so slow, it's really annoying, but also it's a good thing because it's a quality certification in a way.
I said that was the last question, and it is just after 1, but I'm going to sneak one more in because it was a late question that I would like to have asked myself if I'd thought of it, from Mylène Guermont, who you may remember as the engineer and artist who did the project in Place de la Concorde a couple of years ago, the obelisk. She's asking about water. You know, I've seen a transformation as you started your presentation with the descend, the plage de Paris. There's a different attitude about the river about access to water, maybe water quality. Paris is known for making bottle filling stations, drinking water available. Can you briefly describe changes in perception of not just air quality, but water quality and water use?
Yeah, I think that was central in our urban policies, is simply reconnecting with the river. And I think you have the same in a way in New York. And it's so much, it's crazy when you think that the space along the river, which is known worldwide, was dedicated to cars. So simply reconnecting and letting Parisian reconnect, walking along the river, and we did that along the Seine, but we are also transforming the spaces along the canals, and we want to really make it a promenade along Canal Saint-Martin, Canal de l'Ourcq, and I think it's very important for the city, especially because we have so few green spaces. So those blue spaces are really essential, and so it's it's essential parts of our urban planning.
Excellent answer. I'd like to thank you, Marianne, for
Thank you.
for a
Thank you
great
so much.
presentation. Thank the audience members for good questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. Thanks, Lance J. Brown, for
Thank you, Marion.
this issue and this effort. But apart from our co-sponsors and collaborating organizations, and particularly Perkins Eastman for hosting and doing all the techniques, I'd really like to thank your mayor for listening to you. And making it possible for a philosopher and environmentalist and political science maven with a grounding in reality to make a difference. And she should be commended, as much as you. So thank you, Ryan.
Thank you so much, Rick.
And thank you all for attending today. Tell your friends to listen to the tape. We'll see you in a month's time, and I won't give away the surprise for who it's going to be, but you'll be in store for a treat, I'm sure. And this was great. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.